to Power Apps in Teams will be presented by Joel and Hardit. And now it's over to Joel and Hardit.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you virtually here. Let me just share my screen and we'll get started. Can you see the screen all right?
Yep.
Okay. So just a little introductions. My name is Joel Lindstrom and I work for Hitachi as well, but this is Hitachi Solutions. I'm based in North America. And my role is there, I'm the principal power platform architect for Hitachi North America. I get involved in a lot of our projects. I've been with Hitachi and company that became Hitachi for 14 years. I've also been 13-time business applications MVP, and I'm also, you can check out CRM Audio Podcast, we've been doing that for about 6 years, all about business applications and Power Platform. Hardit, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, and Joel, I don't think you'll get tired of introducing yourself before me, but Hardit Bhatia, I also work at Hitachi, primarily work with Joel and a couple of other folks in the Power Platform practice. I am a business applications MVP as well. If you are on Twitter, you can follow me. Twitter handle is the Power Addict. If you go on LinkedIn and you search by my name, I think there are only 2 people in the world with that name. So it should be easy for you to recognize me. And then there's my email address as well. So really looking forward to the session today.
Great. Thanks, Hardit. So we're going to be talking about Microsoft Teams, but specifically the value of using Power Apps and Teams together. If you paid attention during Microsoft Ignite last week, there was some big announcements about Microsoft Teams, and one of them was that Power Apps is getting much more integrated with Teams through what they're calling Project Oakdale is the code name. That's basically every Teams environment is going to have the ability to have a light version of Microsoft's Common Data Service in there, and you'll be able to build apps for Teams right within Teams. And Hitachi Solutions North America, our team has had the pleasure of working with Microsoft for the last about 4 months, maybe a little bit longer, to build the apps that were launched with that, along with a couple others that we're still working on. They wanted to not just put the platform out, but also have some apps that people could download to see, what it was like to build an app on Oakdale and some of the things that are going to be the way that they work together. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go on. So why Power Platform and Teams? What's the value of Power Platform and Teams? Well, Power Apps are great. We've been doing Power Apps for 2 years, a little bit longer. They came out really 2017, but then 2018 with the release of CDS 2.0 is when they really became really a hot thing. And so with Power Apps, you can create apps that are connected to up to there's 350 different connectors. You can do custom connectors. And you've been able for a while to put Power Apps in Teams. Why put Power Apps in Teams? Because unless you're using them on a mobile phone, a Power App, once you get a bunch of them, they can be hard to find for users. You get 25, 30, 40, 50, 100 apps. It becomes kind of overwhelming because how do I find them? So by putting them in Teams, since people are using Teams, it's Microsoft's hottest platform now. It's used by 75 million people per day actively. And so as part of that, well, people are using Teams a lot, especially during the pandemic where everybody's working remotely. It makes sense to put apps in Teams if they're in context of a group. So for example, you have a group of people that work together on a certain job, a certain project, or some other thing like that. It makes sense because they don't have to remember to go somewhere else. To them, they might not even know it's a Power App. To them, it might be I'm just in Teams and I have my timesheet there, my expense report, other things like that. And so that's where the value put in there. It removes a lot of the friction in doing that. And now with Project Oakdale, you have the ability without, even if you don't have a Dynamics or a Power Apps license, you have the ability to benefit from the Common Data Services, which is Microsoft's premier relational database service. Up to now, you've had to pay for a license for a user. A lot of people have Office licenses that have Power Apps seeded with them, but that only basically includes SharePoint. Now with this, every team can have its own database, and that database has 1.5 gigabytes of available space that you can use. So it's not designed for your big enterprise apps, but it's designed for your kind of applications that are, maybe team related or related to a group. But you could have everybody in your company in a team and use that app if you wanted to. They've also simplified the security, basing it on the Office, on the owner member group model, the OMG model. So you can build apps that say, if you're an owner of the team, you can do this. If you're a member, you can do this. And they've also streamlined the controls, which you'll see in a little bit, to be much more Office-like. The controls that are in full Power Apps were introduced in about 2016, and they've added new ones since then, but they're not the most modern. And this gives you a way to make something that looks a little bit modern, feels like Teams, and also recognize other team settings, which we'll get into a little bit. So the apps that we've built that have been released that are now part of the Teams store, and these are Microsoft apps. These aren't Hitachi apps. Microsoft hired Hitachi to do this, but these are actual Microsoft apps that you can go download. The first is Inspection, and I'll show you some of these during the meeting today. But Inspection is designed for people that want to, to track and to inspect their equipment, their machines, their areas, their locations. It's a generic. It's replacing paper inspection forms. So a lot of manufacturing companies, service companies, retail stores, they have a piece of paper and you go around and check the list. So it's kind of your electronic checklist, making those things more actionable. Issue reporting is when you find an issue, being able to report the issue, kind of a simple task system. This is cool because it works with the other things inside of Teams, such as Planner. So when I create an issue, it will log it in Planner, and then you can schedule it through Planner, which you're probably already using, all from within Teams. Then Employee Ideas, this is your kind of your digital suggestion box, allowing you to to create campaigns like return to workplace or suggestions, and have employees submit suggestions and other people vote for them. So that's also one of them. So I'll show you kind of how you can do it. If you want to jot these down, for the shortcut is aka.ms Teams Inspection for the inspection app, aka.ms/Teams Issue Reporting, and aka.ms/Teams Employee Ideas for the Employee Ideas app. Let me jump in and give you a quick tour through some of these apps, because they've now been downloaded, I believe, 15,000 times based on what the PM told me this morning, which is pretty exciting. And it's something that shows that it's something that's just general scenarios that anybody can use. So, for example, I want to do an inspection. So what I recommend is, first of all, let me show you how you'd install it. So you would go search, and by the way, this doesn't work with the free version of Teams. You have to have an Office E3, E5, something like this. But as long as you don't have the free version, you should be able to go to Teams, and you should be able to. So I'm just going to search for inspection. So what I would do is, first, I would recommend you create a team. Maybe create one team with 3 channels: inspection, employee ideas, and issue reporting. Then what you want to do is, I would add Planner to them. Now, not all of them use Planner. I think, if I'm not mistaken, Employee Ideas does not use Planner, but the other 2 do, issue reporting as well as inspection. So you want to have a Planner in that channel before you do it. So then I would go add a team, and then choose that team that you created. And again, this database that's created is limited just to the team. So when you install First App, it's going to provision the CDS Lite or Oakdale database for you. So then you would search for that channel. And now I've already installed it, so I'm not going to go all the way through here. But then you say set up a tab, and then there's one more screen just to confirm that you want to do this. And so you'd hit save, and it would then install the app for you. So that's pretty easy, and it should install. Now, the first one you install is going to set up that environment for you. So you want to plan for a few minutes there. But once that's done, I wouldn't install multiple at the same time. I found sometimes it slows it down. But if you go install one of them and then go install the others after that. So let me walk through this and kind of walk through the flow here. So if you're a user, and here's another cool thing is if you pull these up on a phone, it's going to go into phone format. So it wasn't long ago apps didn't work on phones. Now Power Apps in Teams work on the phone. So even though these apps are limited just within a team, that doesn't stop you from using them on your phone. You can pull up the Teams app on your Android or iOS phone, and then you can go ahead and start using them. So the idea of inspection is, first of all, you would provision it there's two apps to install, one called Manage Inspection, the other one called Inspection. You would first go to the Manage app, and there's several setup steps like linking it to the planner that you want to do. But I'm just going to go through and start with the user because I think it tells the story better. So I'm going to go in and say perform an inspection, then choose the area that you want. Again, you could set this up to be assets or locations or equipment, whatever you want. And then you would have one or more forms, such as if you're in a store, you would have the morning store walk. Before you open the store, you would want to go here and create and check your store. So you would go through, and this is designed to be quick. So you have one or more question with 3 different buttons. And by default, they say OK, issue, NA. So I'm going to say issue to this one and put in a task, which I'm going to assign to Hardit here. Well, actually, Hardit's not in here. So I'm going to go to Ashish here, and because he's in this environment. All right, and then I'm going to say whatever notes. If you put notes in, they'll show up here automatically. Let me just add the task here. So once I did that, you'll see that the task will show up in Planner automatically. So then on the manager experience, this is where the manager can either view and report on inspections, or they can modify the experience. So I mentioned this is designed to be a generic experience. It could be equipment, or it could be assets or areas. If I go to the settings gear, and then I go to customize experience, I can choose to call these locations or whatever you want to put. If you change these from location to asset, an asset type, and save those, then what you'll see is this changes from add location to add assets. So you probably would want to go change this default data and take that out. But if I wanted to then create or modify the inspection forms, so here I've got the detailed walk form. If I go change that, and I want to change either the text or I want to change the buttons here, and this is all right, and there's a problem. So by doing that, you can change that. So we're building in configurability in there. So that you can go in and configure the experience without having to edit the app. So that's the inspection app. Just quickly, I'm going to show you employee ideas because this is kind of a different kind of app. So if you go to employee ideas, in this case, there's currently one app for employee ideas, and so you as a manager would create a campaign. So we have several standard campaigns here. And so then a user, when they come in here, they can go in and go to cafe food and they want to submit an idea. When you define an idea campaign, you can specify a date threshold where ideas will be suggested. So if you want to have it be for 30 days or something, anything suggested, if you go there after that, it's not going to let you do that. And I believe there's also minimum vote thresholds. Like with inspection, you can customize this form for this type of for issues submitted as part of this campaign. You can customize the questions they're asked, kind of justification questions. How much will it cost? What's the impact it will have? So this is something where you can really use this to because your colleagues, your employees, they're your most valuable asset because they're the ones who are on the front lines, can see how the business is working, and then other employees can come and vote for these, and do that. So that's and that way you can then see which ones have the most votes, and then go in and apply the ones that get the most votes. So those are the out-of-the-box apps. If you though want to be a maker in here, so first of all, you can go download those apps. But if you wanted to modify these apps, or you want to create your own app, what you can do is you can go back to the store here and open the Power Apps app. It's got the nice new icon there. I really like the new icon, by the way. And so you have the choice of creating a new app, or you can go and you can go edit one of the existing apps. So if I was to open up, let's just say Employee Ideas in the installed apps, I could go here, could click on the app, and then if you're familiar with Power Apps, we're not going to get too deep into the maker experience here, but it's basically like having the full maker experience right within Teams. But if you're building an app there, or you're editing an app and publish it out, it's going to publish it within the Dataflex, not Dataflex, that's the word we can't use anymore, the Project Oakdale CDS Lite environment within the team you select. And so this is always a little slower when I'm sharing my screen on Teams for some reason. Let me go back one more thing before I turn it over to Hardit. Actually, just click off of here. All right, so I'll go back here. I'm just going to go and create a new one, because another thing I really like about this is they now give us a really nice, so first of all, if you create an app, you're going to first have to choose which team it goes into. They don't yet have the ability to move apps between teams, so keep that in mind. It is a public preview, but that'll be coming soon. So I'm going to choose that team, and then I'm going to create an app. So with traditional Power Apps, the layout that you get standard with them has been really optimized more for phones than for tablets. You have mainly if you create an app from data, you get the 3 different forms. You get the main form with the gallery, then you get a display form, then you get an edit form. When you're dealing with a tablet, though, there's a lot more real estate available to you. And so what you'll see here, just by going here, you can gather some really helpful information about good design patterns for a full screen app. Because what we like to do is keep as much on a single screen as we can. We don't like to, especially if you've got a lot of real estate on an iPad or a full screen, or full screen in this case, inside of Teams. What you're going to see is if you do the phone layout, it is very large and wastes a lot of space. Here now you have a nice, more data dense view. I'll zoom in a little bit, and you can just see from looking at this several things that are interesting design patterns. So for example, if I go to the screen 1 and I go to the on visible, what you'll notice is they're automatically putting in kind of variables that define standard sizes and color values and things like that. And if you build your app using these new controls, it will automatically switch to dark mode or high contrast if you use that. And so you can also see here that there's no display form. One thing that we've found is if you use display forms, it's kind of a waste, because a display form can only be read-only, where if you use an edit form, it can be read-only or it can be editable. So that's what we like about this. It also, certain design patterns, like if I hit the trash can, you'll notice it's got a standard kind of overlay that shows confirming the delete. That's something that wasn't kind of out of the box. So now you can go in here very quickly, and this isn't fancy or anything, but it's using things to make it automatically recognize the Teams theming, to automatically resize when you resize your window and work, be responsive, automatically have a side panel and a form here that if I connect this to data source, this is something else that I really like, is the new editable grid. If I wanted to make a contact entity, if you've used Common Data Service, you know that there's a number of steps that you go through. And they've created a simplified version of this for the Oakdale that has basically an editable grid where you can go in and simply add the columns that you want and enter the data. So we're talking about bulk editing. Like if you want to go delete all the data that is in the sample app, you can go to edit the app, click on the table, see all the data, and edit it, delete it right from there. So to give Hardit time, because he's actually going to get in, I was involved in this, but Hardit did a lot more of the development than I did. So I want to make sure you hear from him because he's had a lot of really great experience and lessons learned about doing this. What we want to focus on for the rest of this is, okay, so whether you use Oakdale or not, even if you're not ready to use Oakdale, you're still building apps that people will just use standalone, whether you use SharePoint. There are things that we've done that we've learned where you can make any app be more Teams friendly. So, well, Oakdale makes it easier for you because you've already got it in Teams, you're creating in Teams, you're publishing in Teams, the controls look and feel a lot more like Teams. You can do the same thing using any Power App. And so if you have full Common Data Service and you want to build an app and put it in Teams, you can use what we've learned to avoid app sprawl, deploy apps in context of Teams, and give people a great experience. All right, Hardit, I'll turn it over to you and go ahead and show us what you got.
Awesome, thanks, Joel. Okay. Let's see. And this should be coming up. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yeah, we see it.
Okay, perfect. So couple of things before we get started. One is we will shift focus between Oakdale apps and non-Oakdale apps or standalone Canvas apps because we definitely want to talk about how standalone or like full CDS Canvas apps can be made to look and feel like a Teams app or an Oakdale app. But at the same time, it's kind of important to review some of the differences between the two because there might be some cases in which a standalone Canvas app might work better. And then in some cases, from a look and feel perspective, an Oakdale app might give you a better streamlined experience. So again, both of them are pretty nice, but the important point here is you don't have to use an Oakdale app to get the same look and feel. So you can just take a standalone Canvas app, use the regular controls and make it look like a Teams app. So with that said, let's start with some basic UX patterns. So one important thing that's very important when creating an app that you want to embed in Teams is something as simple as font. So everything in Teams uses Sego UI. And when you create a Power App, the default font that is selected is Open Sans. So if you just go ahead with that and don't change it to Sego UI, your Power App will stand out significantly from the rest of the Teams app. So that's one. Second is when you create an Oakdale app, one thing you will notice is the font size is defaulted to 10.5 for every control. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is one big reason why Power Apps don't look like native phone apps is because when you are creating an app in the studio, the font size, even if it's like 18 or 20, it looks pretty neat within the studio. But then when you go to your mobile device and try to play the app, that's when the font looks really big and it looks like a fifth grader has created that app. So it sounds pretty simple, something like font and font sizes, but they play a big role in making sure that your apps look more streamlined and in line with the Teams experience. So next is sentence case. So if you look in Teams, you will see that every text is in sentence case, which is first alphabet of the first word is in uppercase. Whereas, I mean, I personally, whenever I've created a Power App, I'm very tempted to have the first alphabet of every word capitalized. But again, if you do that, it's not in line with the team's experience. So use sentence casing. Um, Talking about layout, that's exactly what Joel was talking about. When we create a mobile app, we get some good patterns from looking at some of the template apps. But when you're trying to create a tablet app, typically if you follow the same patterns, which is creating a gallery on one screen and then creating a form on another screen, while that works, it's not always the best user experience because there's a lot of real estate. And if you create a gallery and just a gallery on one screen, there's only so many columns that you can add or so many fields that you can add in a gallery, right? So it's not going to look good. So what this particular layout, what an Oakdale app tells us is it's a very, very simple layout, but one that works really good. So there's a header at the top. There is a gallery on the left hand side. There is a details section, if you will, which basically is just a form that allows you to view records, create records, and edit records, which again, like Joel said, is using an edit form rather than a display form. And then there are some basic icons on the top right corner that you can use to edit records and so on and so forth. Some of the other good layout patterns or design patterns that these apps tell us right out of the box are things like when you try to delete a record, there's a nice overlay pop-up that shows up that prompts the user that, hey, if you are about to delete a record, do you really want to go forward with it? So a couple of cool features here and there just by creating a blank app in Oakdale without even adding any control or doing anything with the app. And then coming to controls, the controls that are available within Oakdale are Fluent UI based, so to speak, and they look pretty awesome. And I'm going to show you a couple of them. So if you like them and you get discouraged that you will not be able to use these kind of controls in a standalone Canvas app, while that is true to a certain extent, you can actually replicate pretty much all of the controls in a standalone or in a full CDS Canvas app. Of course, it will require a lot more effort, but it's doable, except for one single control and a couple of other properties that I'll show you real quick. So if I go back here, so this is a very simple Oakdale app. I literally just added a few controls here. The gallery was added by default. This plus icon was added by default. Title, everything was already added, like this edit icon, save, cancel. I just added a simple form here, a button, a label, and date picker. So if you look at this button, it has a nice Teams purple color. When you hover over it, it changes to like a dark color. And then more importantly, if you look at this guy right here, which is the date picker control, and this is one of the controls that I hate the most within Power Apps, because if you have worked with the date picker control, you would know that the only customization capabilities you have with the date picker control is the color schemes from one of the themes that are available within Power Apps. And if you look at themes, there are only a few limited ones. So while you can customize almost every control, you cannot customize the look and feel of a date picker control. But when you look in Oakdale, the date picker control looks awesome. There are a lot of configuration capabilities, like you can say, I don't want the user to be able to click any date before 1st October and later than 7th October. So you can see that all the other dates are grayed out. You have a month selector as well. Again, I can't select it here because the other dates are disabled. But you have a lot of UI capabilities that are not available in classic controls. That being said, like I said, like a label or a button is replicatable, if that's a word, in Power Apps. But yeah, we will look at some of these controls in detail on the next slide. So the cool thing about Fluent UI controls is the fact that they come with certain color properties that are already themes based. So if I go back here inside the studio and I look at this button, you can see that the property pane on the right hand side is not the same as what you would expect in a full CDS Canvas app. There are certain properties that are new, and then there are certain properties that no longer exist. So to speed up the process of creating a Power App in Teams, some cool new properties have been added. For example, if you look at a button, you have this new property called button type, and it has two values, primary and secondary. It defaults to primary, and then which is what gives it the team's purple color and the hover color. But if you change this to secondary, it goes into a white button that has a gray border. Again, all the colors are still in line with what the team's color scheme is. So pretty simple configuration. If this would have been a full CDS app, you would have had to specify the color, the hover color, fill colors, and so on and so forth to get this particular color scheme. But with this Fluent UI control, all you have to do is just pick whether you want this as a primary button or a standard button. So another cool thing, you have three different themes in Teams: default, dark, and high contrast. If you have a full CDS app that you are embedding in Teams, you will have to do a lot of work, which we have done in some of those in all of those sample apps rather. So if you go to one of those like inspection or employee ideas and you open it in the editor or the studio, you will see how we have manually adapted all the controls in those apps based on the Teams theme. But here, I've done nothing with this control. I'm going to go in here and change my theme. And you can see that all the controls change their color schemes. Now my date picker control is black. If I come in here and change it to high contrast, it's going to get those similar colors. So these controls by default adapt to Teams theme. And all of these features just allow for a quick creation of Power App from within Teams. One downside is that you have lesser configuration capabilities. So to give you an example, if you add a label, you cannot have a label have a border, which again, should you? Maybe not, but if you want to, you cannot do that. So definitely lots of positives and a few limited configuration capabilities as far as these controls are concerned. So there are certain differences between these Fluent UI controls and the classic controls. And the main differences between the two, other than the look and feel, is the fact that there are certain properties that are renamed. So if I go here, for example, for a checkbox, the classic control had a property called default, and you could specify it as true or false. And based on that, the checkbox by default would be checked or unchecked. Now that property is called checked. So this table gives you all the differences. It's kind of important to review this because if you have used the classic controls and you've suddenly started using these Fluent controls, it's easy to get confused and lost as to, for example, for a checkbox, you would be wondering where the default property is. And the only difference is that it's been renamed from default to checked. So strongly suggest reviewing this table. And then moving on from controls, like we just saw, there are three different themes: dark, default, and high contrast. If you go to this developer page, it actually gives you all the different colors that are available, not just for Teams, but for every Microsoft product. So if I click on Teams, it gives me colors for all themes. So here it says for default themes, these are some of the shades of purple. These are some neutral colors. These are some dark theme colors. So these are the colors that we have used in those sample apps. Again, if you are creating an app within Oakdale, you don't have to worry about this because the controls are already configured with the right colors. But if you're creating a full CDS app that you want to embed in Teams, look at this color scheme, or go to one of those sample apps and look at the colors because that will help those apps look in line with the entire Teams experience. Now, how do you fetch the theme inside the app? If it's an Oakdale app, in most cases, you won't need to fetch the value of theme because controls automatically adapt to it. But that being said, there are certain things that don't automatically adapt. For example, if you add a screen to an Oakdale app, the screen fill color or the screen background color doesn't adapt to the Teams theme by default. So for that, what you will have to do is you will have to fetch the current theme of your Teams app. And there are a couple of ways you can do that. In an Oakdale app, you can simply use the Teams integration control, which we will look in detail in a couple of slides. And then in a full CDS app, you can use the param function because theme is one of the parameters that get passed in the app URL. So we'll look at both of them in more detail in the next couple of slides. And then once you get a value from either the param or the team's integration control, you can actually compare it with either dark, contrast, or default. And those three values are available in this team's theme enumeration. We will see an example of this as well. So when you create an app in Oakdale, you get a team's integration control. So if I go back here, if you have worked with, say, embedded Canvas apps, you would know that embedded Canvas apps have a new control or a additional control, which is model-driven form integration. Similarly, when you create an Oakdale app, which is nothing but an app embedded in Teams, you get this Teams integration control. It's right here underneath app. It has no properties, but it allows you to fetch a few values. For example, you can check if the app is being opened in full screen or not. You can check the name of the theme that you are in, whether dark, high contrast, or normal, or default. And then it also gives you some information about the channel that you are in. Like, for example, what's the name of the channel? Is it a private channel or not? And then the team that you are in, for example, the display name or the ID of the team that you might need for a couple of reasons that we will review at the end of this, towards the end of this presentation. So the Teams integration control gives you certain basic properties. Again, it's not all the properties that you would need, but it's a good starting point, and it's still in public preview, so you can expect certain additions to happen at some point of time to this control. But then let's move on to the next, to the full CDS apps. If you want to do a similar thing, right? For example, if you want to fetch what theme your Teams app is currently in, you don't have that Teams integration control available. So what you can do is you can use the param function, which allows you to fetch lots of values. Again, some of them are exactly the same. Like, for example, if you want to check if it's in full screen or what the theme is, but then there are also some additional properties that are available. For example, what is the role of the user that is currently accessing the app? Is he the owner of the team, or is he just a member of the team? What is the current team type? Is it private or not? So a couple of cool parameters that are available. So even if you are using a full CDS app within Teams, you have access to all the values that you would have gotten from the Teams integration control. And in fact, you have access to some more properties as well. And with that, I'm going to show you some of the parameters that are available. And then we'll talk about responsiveness, which is a pretty interesting topic. So here I have a list of all parameters that are available. As you can see, there is tenant ID, source, is it in a Teams app tab or not? What is the channel ID? What is the theme? Right here it says default. And then if I change this to dark mode and I refresh this app, it will show that it's dark. And then user team role is 0, which is owner, because I am the owner of this team. So some cool features, some cool values that you can get even in an app that is not an Oakdale app. Now, that being said, when you create a Power App, you want to make sure that it is a responsive app, because most of the apps that we use on our phones are responsive. And if we want Power Apps to give you the same experience as a native phone app, making them responsive becomes a very important thing. So there are certain steps that you can take to make an app responsive. The goal here is not to go through each one of those steps, but to cover certain important aspects. So starting off with the most important thing that you would do is typically when you create an embedded Canvas app, which is a Canvas app inside of a model-driven form, first thing that we do is if we go to File, Settings, and if you go to Advanced Settings, there is this experimental feature called Optimize Embedding Experience or Appearance. If you create an Oakdale app, this is set to on by default. What it basically does is it aligns the app to the top left corner. Again, it sounds good, but it may or may not be the best experience. So what happens when I set the optimize embedding experience of this particular app to true? So if I go here to this tab here, the app is moved to the left side. It is now anchored to the top left corner. But as you can see, there is a lot of white space now because this is the size of my app. And the reason why this white space is bad is because if you are in default theme, it's probably not that bad. If your screen is also say white in color, but the problem is this white section doesn't adapt based on the team's theme. So if I come here and go back to the dark mode, everything adapted to that theme except this white space. So simply turning on the optimize embedding experience doesn't give you the desired result. So the next thing you would do for any responsive app is go to settings, go to screen size plus orientation, and set scale to fit to false. When you do that, the app will not stretch to fill the entire space. And that will allow you to control the positioning of controls relative to certain other controls so they can move around and make the app responsive. And when you turn this off, the lock aspect ratio gets turned off automatically because if you're not allowing the app to scale, locking a particular aspect ratio doesn't make sense. So just by turning this off, the app changes from this to what you will see now, which is you get rid of the white space because now the app is not trying to scale. It's not trying to optimize its embedding experience, which is what caused the white space to show up. But again, is it the best experience? Probably not, because the table is so small, still anchored to the top left corner, and you have the app show up in the entire space. So what would be the next thing that you will do? That is, if you now go back, and I'm going to show you some things that I've done here. So if you start off with an app, if you add a new screen, say I add a blank screen here, basically what will happen is when you look at the height and width properties of those screens, it will have a formula something along the lines of max app.height, app.design height. The first thing that you would do is, change that to just app.height, or you can even specify a minimum value, because in most cases, you will not be able to make an app completely responsive to every single possible size. There might be certain minimum height, certain minimum width that you might want to retain. For this particular example, I've simply set it to app.height and app.width. Then I have just one control here. It's a form. The one thing that I've done here is if you go to width, I have set it to parent.width, and the height is now parent.height instead of a fixed value. What that means is the parent of this form is the screen itself. So as the screen size changes, the form size will change as well. So with literally just these two changes, if I now go back and look at the same app, it now turns into this. It's full screen now, or at least fits in the entire window. The form adapts itself based on the screen size, and it's more presentable. So if we look at the transition, we started off with this, a lot of gray space, an app in the middle. Then the app moved on to the left-hand side, but a lot of white space. Then no white space, no gray space, but the content still sticking to the left-hand side. And then finally an app where the content also resizes based on the app size. So with these concepts in mind, you can make any app responsive, which in this case also becomes important because if you open a Power App now within Teams on a desktop, you will obviously have a different screen size. And if you try to open that same app within the Teams app on a phone, the form factor is significantly different. One thing that has made creating responsive apps easier is the container control. And I do have an example of container control here. And the reason I want to show that is I'm not going to walk you through the process of using a container control to create a responsive app, but the idea is very simple. Before you can use it, make sure you go to File, Settings, Advanced Settings, and Experimental Features. It's an experimental feature at this point of time, but it works perfectly fine. So I would say go in, turn this on, and then play around with it. The concept is pretty simple. In the other app that you just saw, I had a form on a screen. But again, most of your apps will not be that simple. You will have lots of controls. So instead of having every single control adapt to the screen size, what you can do is you can group controls, put them in containers. Then you can resize and reposition containers based on the screen. And then all you have to do is make sure that the controls inside a container get resized or repositioned based on the container rather than the screen. So based on that concept, the point that I wanted to show here is traditionally, when you didn't have container controls and you wanted to make an app responsive, there was no way to test it within the studio. So if you want to make a change, you would make that change, save the app, publish it, and then run the published app, and then see whether the small change that you made actually works fine or not, which is a painful process. Now with container controls, the reason why it's pretty cool is because you can do something as simple as this. So if you go in and add a slider control, and again, this app that you're seeing right now is actually a full CDS app. It's not an Oakdale app, but it has controls that have been made to look like the Fluent UI controls, which again is not very straightforward, but just by playing around with some properties, like for example, there are certain colors here that we are specifying. Like for example, if you go to the screen, we are specifying the fill color of the screen based on the theme. So we are checking for the theme inside using the param function, and then based on the theme, we are changing the colors. Okay, so going back here.
There's a question, Hardit.
Yes.
Can we open or edit the Project Oakdale apps in the Power Apps web studio at create.powerapps.com?
So no, Oakdale apps can only be created and edited within the studio that is inside Teams.
Yeah, you can open them in the way I showed. Open Power Apps app, go to see more, and then you can go to installed apps, and from there you can edit the app to launch in the editor. You can edit it in there, and then you can save and publish it back to that team. I think we got about 5 minutes left.
Yeah, I shouldn't take more than that. So just one thing real quick, that when you want to test responsiveness, you can add a slider control, and then all you need to do is make sure that you set its values based on what you expect your container's maximum and minimum width to be. So for example, I'm going to do 300 to 1136. And then what you can do is select the container that you want to check for responsiveness, and for its width, you can simply say slider 1 dot value. And what it allows you to do that is this. So if I now look at this container, I can simply control the width of that container using the slider, and I can check for responsiveness from within the studio. So small little tip that can help speed up testing responsiveness significantly. Okay, and then there are certain things that you might want to do or interact with Teams that may not be possible even using the Teams integration control that you have. For that, you have the Teams connector, which is available even in full CDS apps. Some of the cool things that you can do using that connector is you can actually create a team or a meeting, or you can even post adaptive cards or post messages to Teams channels. So do check out the Teams connector as well. And then just one quick point here, if you look at some of those sample apps, we have leveraged some of the other Teams components, like Joel was saying. We have integration with Planner. And at some point of time, there'll be another feature which will post adaptive cards as well. So a couple of cool things, couple of cool other components that are available within Teams that you can integrate with a Power App, whether it's an Oakdale app or a full CDS app. So that's all I have.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for your time. If there's, we got 2 minutes left. Did anybody have any questions that you didn't type in the comments? While you're asking your questions, let me pop this up one more time just wanted to give you again the shortcut to go download the standard, the sample apps. Hold on just a second. I will share this out again. All right, so go to aka.ms/teams inspection, aka.ms/teams issue reporting, aka.ms/teams employee ideas. Again, I'd recommend create a channel in a private team for each of these, add planner to it, give the planner a unique name. Don't just call it tasks or planner, give it, like you would call it issue reporting tasks or inspection tasks. And that way, because if you have multiple ones with the same name, the app might select the wrong one. And give it a try. Give us some feedback if you get any feedback. Microsoft is anxious to do it before these go to general availability. Any questions?
Don't see any questions at the moment.
All right, well, thank you so much for the invitation. Great job, Hardit, in taking us through how to make your apps look great in Teams. And again, thanks again for the invitation.
Thank you so much for dedicating your time to our local community. We do have a quick question from Lynn.
Yeah, I received one question, I think.
Lynn says, when I created a new field in Project Oaktail, the one of the field types is choices. Is that the same as option set from CDO?
Yeah, that's the new name for option set. Microsoft loves renaming stuff. And so option sets are choices, attributes are, well, I guess attributes haven't changed, but tables, and these are tables, attributes are fields, so it's more in line with, standard database and consistent with SharePoint too, because in SharePoint, an option set was called choices or choice. I think there was one or two other things that was renamed. Hardit, is there anything else you can think of? One thing to keep in mind, some of the properties aren't there, like the radius controls. They're trying to make them be, more automatic, but just keep in mind, and like there's no default property on a checkbox. It's now called checked. So if you don't see something there, it may just be named something different now.
Yeah, and I just pasted a link that points to official documentation that outlines all the differences between classic controls and the Fluent UI controls.
Are drop downs and combo boxes consolidated now?
I think they are available. Both of them are available, but let me double check. Yeah, I don't see drop down. I only see combo box, which makes a lot of sense because you can always turn a combo box into a drop down, but not the other way around. So yeah, it's just a combo box now.
Right. We don't have any questions. So
have a good rest of the meeting.
Thank you so much, Joel and Hardit, for joining and dedicating your time.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Thanks so much, everyone, for joining the session today. Recording would be made available on the user group website and will be posted as a comment on the meetup group within 48 hours. I'm stopping the recording now. Once again, thanks so much. Enjoy your weekend.